The Honda E was Honda's first fully electric car. And you might think that it looks really cool, but the fact is that the range you can travel on a full charge is absolutely terrible. And for what it is, it's incredibly expensive. So has Honda learned any lessons from its first EV effort? Today, we're seeing the Japanese manufacturer's second fully electric car. This is the Honda Ny1, and it is very different from the Honda E. In this review, we're telling you everything that you need to know about this fully electric SUV. Before we start, go to whatcar.com for a great deal on your next car and subscribe to our channel to see lots more new car reveals and reviews. Now you may recognise the Ny1 because although Honda is keen to point out there are big differences, this is essentially a fully electric version of the Honda HR-V. But let's talk through what some of those differences are, starting with the styling, where you can see on the Ny1 you have this blanked out front grille, and in fact the bumpers are different, the headlights are different. The only difference about the wheels is this white H badging, which is something that's going to feature on other future fully electric models from Honda to help differentiate it from the rest of its lineup. And you also have 5 different colours that you can choose from with the Ny1, including this rather fetching aqua topaz. But overall, it does still look fairly similar to the HR-V. The Honda name is spelt out across the back of the car here in this new typeface, and apparently, like the white H badges, this is going to be something that we'll see on future Honda electric models. By the way, the name, apparently Ny1 stands for exciting and new for your life. Now inside, this isn't just a copy and paste job from the HR-V. You can see that in certain places, this is very different from what you have in the HR-V, like here with the infotainment system. So in the HR-V, you have a 9-inch touchscreen infotainment system on top of the dashboard. Now, instead, in the Ny1, you've got this massive portrait-style 15.1-inch touchscreen infotainment system here. So it's split into these 3 sections that you can see, and the look and the feel of it is very similar to Honda's latest infotainment systems, but obviously with this 3-tile layout instead. But you will notice down here that you have climate controls on the touchscreen. So whereas in the HR-V, you had really nicely knurled dials and physical buttons to adjust the air conditioning, now they've removed that, and in the Ny1, you have to use all of those things through this touchscreen infotainment system here, which, as we've said many, many times before, is not as good, not as safe to use while you're driving as the physical buttons and dials. So that is a shame and seems like a bit of a backward step, even though this panel down here is permanently visible no matter what menu you're on, but it's still a shame that they've looked to change it and go for a touchscreen solution here. You get a bigger digital driver display in the Ny1 than you do in the HR-V as well, but otherwise, this is quite similar in here to the HR-V, which is no bad thing because that is a high quality, impressive interior, and it is in the Ny1 as well, with nice materials, soft touch materials around the place, all feels really solid, well put together. You apparently have thicker seat bases in the Ny1 to make these seats even more comfortable, and the sound insulation is apparently better in this car as well to try and make it a little bit quieter in here while you're driving. Now, the styling, the dimensions, the fact that this is based on the HR-V, this is quite clearly an electric SUV, but it's on the small side of the electric SUV class, because while it's up against other rivals like the Kia Niro EV, the Toyota BZ4X, this is smaller than pretty much every other rival. But no other electric SUV has magic seats, and neither does this. Unfortunately, a real practical bonus of going for the HR-V is getting Honda's magic seats, which let you fold up the seat bases to create an extra space for storage. But unfortunately, in transitioning this from the HR-V into the fully electric Ny1, you've lost the magic seats. These seats are no longer magic, but they are apparently thicker than before to, again, like the front seats, make them slightly more comfortable. than the seats in the HRV. And what's the overall space like when you're in these rear seats? Well, legroom is okay, as you can see, for an adult. Should have no problems at all. You do have a slightly odd sitting position where the floor feels quite high, so you've got quite a bend in your knees here, but otherwise, decent amount of room. Headroom doesn't feel quite so generous. So if you're over 6 foot, your head's going to be pretty close to the roof lining here. So there are definitely more practical alternatives in the electric SUV class when it comes to rear seat space. The boot is 304 litres or 319 litres, depending on which spec you go for and whether you get the upgraded sound system that robs a bit of the space that you have in the back of the car here. So overall, like the rear seats, this is definitely on the small side for an electric SUV. You can see that the space that you do have here is fairly simple in its shape. It has no loading lip. You also get a height adjustable boot floor, which gives you a decent amount of space underneath, or the chance to just lower it and increase the overall capacity in the boot. But it must be said, lots of other electric SUVs, in fact most others, like the Niro EV, like the BZ4X, are bigger than what you find in the back of the Ny1. But the Smart #1 is smaller still. Now, what about the range? Well, the Honda E had an absolutely tiny battery. It was 28.5 kilowatt hours, and officially the range was 135 miles, but in real world driving conditions, if it was a bit cold especially, you'd be lucky to get 100 miles on a full charge, which is not particularly good. This Ny1 is much better than that because it has a significantly bigger battery. So this has 61.9 kilowatt hours, and officially the WLTP range is going to be around about 256 miles from a full charge, which again, like all electric cars, will be less in real world driving conditions, but will still certainly be significantly better than the Honda E. In the wider electric car class, it doesn't particularly stand out. There are lots of other rivals that will be closer to 300 miles, some that are over 300 miles. You get a heat pump as standard with the Ny1, so that's an optional extra on lots of other rivals, but you get that as standard, and it means that when you're heating the interior when it's cold, it does so in a much more energy efficient way than if it didn't have a heat pump. The charging port is located at the front of the car and fairly neatly hidden behind the nose here. Now, it is very neat, but it is also rather large, isn't it? And you've got the Honda name again in the charging port bit there. Now, you also have some lights up here on the bonnet line to indicate whether it's charging, whether it's stopped charging, whether it's fully charged, but it doesn't actually show the state of battery charge left, which is a shame. Now, in terms of actual charging speeds that you can manage, this will AC charge at up to 11 kilowatts. And when it comes to fast charging, the maximum speed it can accept is 78 kilowatts, which, to be honest, isn't that impressive by modern EV standards, because most new electric cars getting released now can charge at over 100 kilowatts. So it means that a 10 to 80% charge in ideal conditions at its fastest speed will be done in around 45 minutes. When it comes to performance, the Ny1 gets one electric motor driving the front wheels with 201 brake horsepower. It has a top speed of 99 miles per hour, and we're told the 0 to 62 miles per hour time is around about 7.7 seconds, which is a lot faster than the HRV and indeed pretty swift by electric SUV standards generally, if still some way off what a Tesla Model Y offers. And the price? Well, the regular HRV starts from around £30,000 and goes up to £36,000. It's too early for official full confirmation of what exactly the Ny1 is going to cost, but we've been told to expect a starting price around £45,000. That price doesn't make the Ny1 stand out as being particularly cheap. In fact, if it does have a mid £40,000 starting price, then it's quite a bit more expensive than the entry-level forms of a number of its rivals, like the Niro EV, Toyota BZ4X and the Skoda Enyaq, all of which are more competitive when it comes to range and practicality as well. It would also mean the Ny1 costs about the same as a rear-wheel drive Model Y. So it's clear that Ny1 will have significantly more mainstream appeal than the very niche and compromised Honda E. But we'll have to wait and see the full pricing and specs and drive the thing before we know exactly how it stacks up against its competitive EV rivals. To make sure that you see our full review of the Ny1 as soon as we've driven it, subscribe to our channel. Tell us in the comments below what you think of Honda's new EV, and go to whatcar.com for a great deal on your next car.